welcome to the channel. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Today's review is going to be on the Heimdallr Monster Homage. Now, if you're a subscriber of the channel, you would have seen the unboxing I did a few days ago of this Heimdallr, and as promised, this is going to be the full comprehensive review. I've also got a comparison to follow with the Gen 1 Seiko Monster, and I actually ended up doing the comparison before the actual review. Due to that, I actually know how close this watch is to the original and how well they've actually done. So after you watch this video, please make sure you stay tuned in to watch the comparison that's going to come out shortly after. Now, so if you haven't subscribed, I don't know what you guys are waiting for. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notifications bell so you're up to date with all the latest reviews, and make sure you check all the links within the description of the video. Let's get straight into this one. Everyone knows what the Heimdallr box looks like. We'll move that out of the way. We don't need it. We just want to look at the watch. Let's start off with a couple of dimensions and let's go through the specifications. So spec wise, it's an absolute spec monster, no pun intended. You've got a 316L stainless steel case, bracelet, bezel and case back, as well as a single domed sapphire crystal. And you've also got a NH36 Seiko Epson movement twitch hand winds and hacks, and it beats at 21,600 vibrations per hour, which gives you a 6 ticks per second sweep. It's also a 24 joule movement, one of the most reliable and cheap movements from Japan, and we're very accustomed to this. I'm sure everybody knows what an NH35 is by now. You've also got a 120 click unidirectional rotating bezel with a screw down crown and 200 meters of water resistance. Now, when it comes to the dimensions, you've got a diameter of 42.2 millimeters, a thickness of 13.4 millimeters, and a lug to lug of 47.7 mil. You've also got 20 mil between the lugs, and you've got a weight of 173 grams with roughly 4 links removed, which should give you an overall weight of 175 to 176. Now let's get really well acquainted with this Heimdallr Monster Homage, and of course we're going to start off with the dial and the crystal. Now the dial, as you can see, is a vibrant orange, stands out and it shouts when you wear it on your wrist. And with the dial you've got this matte finish, and you've also got these teeth like hour markers, and at the 12 o'clock you've got a double hour marker, or the fangs as it were. We take a closer look at the indices. You see you've got this yellowish tinge, which no doubt is due to the C3 super luminova used, and you've also got this black outline which is polished around each hour marker. Now the indicators themselves, the indices, they look quite flat, but I believe they are applied, and the border around those indices is very clean and crisp. You've also got printing quite predominantly on this dial, so you've got printing around the chapter ring, you've got printing of that shredded shark logo under the fangs at 12 o'clock, and you've also got printing at the bottom right above the 6 p.m, which is automatic divers 200 meters. You've also got a black outline around the day date frame, and to suit, the hands are also with a black thick outline. Now these hands are recognizably from the Seiko Monster and the Seiko Samurai. There's a very crisp and clean finish to the dial, and all the indices and all the printed work is done to a very high quality. And with the crystal used, you can see that chamfered edge around the side, which will give you that slight bit of refraction between the chapter ring. And you've also got a domed sapphire glass with very minimal AR coating. I think it's important we mention that because a lot of the brands that we do see have very overpowering AR coating, which deflects from the actual color of the dial. Now, if memory serves me correct, I don't think I have ever come across a Heimdallr that has poor loom. They've had really great loom from day dot as far as I can remember, and they use C3 super luminova, and this monster is absolutely no different. I haven't charged it with the UV lamp, and this is just from the LEDs within the room, and you can see how bright that is. Longevity on this loom is proven as well, and you can also see the loom has been applied to that pip at the 12 o'clock on the bezel. Now let's give it a quick blast on the UV lamp just to show you the difference. As you can see how that's just lit up like a torch. Like as mentioned, it does burn very bright. Looking at the bezel, we can see that it is full 316L stainless steel. Now that is pretty significant because I have seen some of the brands that come out from China, they don't always use 316L stainless steel. They use the grade Dan. I don't know, I think it's 304 or 309 something, but it is a grade Dan and it is a slight different color and there is a different feel to it. But however, this is in true Monster fashion, full 316L, and let's see if you can hear that rotation. Now for the most part, it sounds perfectly fine. It rotates really well. You've got zero playback. The clicks are sharp, accurate, and it does, you'll be glad to hear, it does line up perfectly well. But what I do recommend, obviously it's fresh at the box, so it is good to kind of bed these things in sometimes. Very well done, fully brushed across the surface. Let's look at some macro video shots and just go through the detailing that is present on the bezel. Now Heimdallr have done really well on the finishing of this bezel and the case. You've got circular brushing around the bezel, and you've also got that pip which is encased within that enamel. Yes, it is protruding slightly, but we'll cover that later on. The markers, I'd assume it's all enamel paint. They've been filled in really well. There's no gaps or any hot spots on the paint or any overruns. The cutting and the finishing is again exceptional. There's no sharp edges present on the face of the actual bezel. And when we go around to the sides where you've got the actual grips located, you'll also see further polishing. If you look closely towards the edge, the rim of the actual bezel, you'll see a very high polish. Now following on from that polish, it transitions into these three, I don't know what they're called, but they've got this linear brushing present, and in between those grooves is highly polished. Now as well as between those grips where it's recessed, again highly polished, and you've got that transition between a very high polished surface into a brush surface. Now that also carries on onto the sides of the case, and you can see again that recess on the bottom of the case, very highly polished, you know, effectively blemish free. And then you've got this linear downwards brushing that goes across the lugs and across the whole of the case. Now Heimdallr have also provided us drilled lugs, which is such a convenience in this day and age. Now if you look at the bottom across this half stride, you'll also see the level of dimensions actually present on this case, which you might not actually pay attention to. So you can see that almost chamfer around that edge there, and you can see that circular brushing and how that transitions across onto the lug tips. Now further on from the lug tips, you also got another flat surface underneath, which is again brushed through the center of the lugs. You've got a very high polished surface, which again they've done really well. And then that again, that transition going onto the side of the lug tips with that straight downwards linear brushing. So the brushing on this watch, the finishing is immaculate. You can see the crisp, clear definition, and as mentioned, it's easy to miss all these different lines and transitions on the case of a watch unless you go into this detail. Now all this beautifully transitions onto the back of the watch as well, where you've got a fully high polished surface as well as that recognizable Heimdallr emblem on the back of the case back with the engravement of the specifications that you're going to find on the watch. The crown is a screw down crown as mentioned, and you've got really deep nailing to give you that really incredible grip on the crown, and it does screw in pretty well, very smooth threads, and there's no issues with the crown in that sense. Now when we start looking at the bracelet at a closer level, wow, Heimdallr have done incredibly well on so many aspects of this watch. Again, we're going to go back to finishing. Just look at that fine brushing across those links. You can see the male links are highly polished, and you've got this linear brushing, and look how it catches the light. It is to a very high standard across all those links, and you can see an obvious taper, which we'll discuss when we do the follow-up, or sorry, the conclusion. And you've got this engraved Heimdallr shark and the lettering just underneath that clasp. The clasp, of course, is a milled scissor-like clasp with a flip-lock mechanism, but I want you to pay particular attention to the edges of these links. Yes, they're highly polished, and they use a pin collar system, which is annoying as hell, but you can't see that sharpness. That's why I've zoomed in at this close level. You cannot see that sharp edginess on the links. So when you hold the bracelet in your hand, you don't get any edginess at all. It has been smoothed It's been expertly finished, and the bracelet is one of the key features of this watch. Let's give you the flare out dimensions. So the the bracelet is 20mm, and it flares out to 23mm, and then it tapers all the way down to 20mm at the clasp. Now I really want to focus your attention on the bracelet. In my first initial impression video, when I did the unboxing, the first thing I did actually catch on is the bracelet. Anybody who owns this, and I want you guys to tell me in the comments, what do you guys think about the actual bracelet? When I've handled quite a lot of AliExpress watches, I've handled, you know, from low down to possibly, let's just say, the best ones, which top of our heads, let's say San Martin, a really good clasp. But even I find their bracelet on that sub Homage, it's still edgy and sharp, and when you do wear it daily, it does give you a very slight bit of discomfort. Now this is the most OEM feeling bracelet coming out of China, coming from the brands, and even from Heimdallr. It has been refined to such a high degree, and it is fully appreciated. Let's see what this monster looks like on the wrist. So before we do that, let's give you a wrist shot. And yes, I am double strapping today. If you did see my unboxing video yesterday, being Sunday, these are my first micro brands, and part of the review, you know, I've got to try and obviously test them out. So let's remove this and put this away. Let's put the monster on. The clasp, milled scissor clasp, pretty standard clasp. There's nothing special on the clasp at all, and any sharpness that you do feel is actually due to the clasp. You've got 3 micro adjusts, which is the usual for these, and you can pick these up on AliExpress separately, and like I said, this is what they've done. Obviously they've engraved it with their own logo, but they haven't gone that, you know, that step further to actually change the clasp. But the bracelet, very, very smooth. Here's what this monster looks like. My wrist is 6.5 inches for reference, and I've said, even going back to the original Seiko monsters, on paper and in pictures you think it's just too big, but it isn't at all. It's that lug to lug, it's in that 47mm bracket, so it will suit smaller wrists. Obviously look fantastic on bigger wrists, but the guys with a small wrist, yes, you can also have the joy of experiencing a monster, whether it's from Heimdallr or whether it's from Seiko. So now it's time to summarize. Okay, so I've spoken, as you can tell, very highly of this watch. I'm very impressed with the whole piece. So if I were to describe or say one character, one feature of this watch which makes it stand out from all of Heimdallr's watches, and you know, pretty much any of the model that's sort of coming out, I'd say that word, I'm using it again, the finishing. You know, people who hold this in their hand, you'll know exactly what I mean. When we go in close on the macros, you'll see that the brushing has been done so well, and they've captured all the angles. I mean, I didn't know until I looked that close, like just how many facets. You've got multifaceted log ends, for example, and you know, it's very easy for a Chinese manufacturer to miss that, or just put polishing all day around. Now this being a tool watch, brushing is very essential for the watch, and I agree with what they've done here. Most of the watch should be brushed. Obviously it's going to not allow you to see all those very fine hairline scratches that you pick up on highly polished surfaces, but they have got polishing, like so. If you were to put the watch that way, you'll see the polishing between the lugs, and you also see the polishing between the grips. So just that level of machining. So if you can imagine that case going through its process, and you know, you've got this transition from brush, polish, brush, polish, brush, polish. You know, they've paid a lot of attention to detail. There's a lot of focus that has gone into this watch, and now this is the first production. So this is the first batch of cases after the sample. Now I don't know how many samples they went through, you know, or just after the prototype, but this is the first batch. So while we're seeing the first batch, let's now talk about the improvements or the things that I don't like. Now with regards to what I don't like, there is only one absolute major which should not have been missed, and I don't think it should have come out of factory like that. It might sound a bit harsh, but when I point it out, I think you guys will agree. If we look at the half shroud, if we look at the points, now I know whoever's owned this model must have seen this. They're like the tips of crambits almost. very sharp. Initially when I got it, as I rotated it, I just felt my finger catching. Right now, you might not get any serious injury, but you will definitely feel that sharpness. So if you, and it does depend how you rotate it. If you're not paying attention, that will dig straight into your finger. Now, of course, if you've got kids around you, and you know, if your kids are anything like the little ones that run around me, you know, they love playing with my watches. So yeah, it's a bit of a danger, bit of a hazard. That's way too sharp, and it should have been spotted. Now we don't know if it was spotted, but that does need to be addressed pretty ASAP, especially on the V2 version. I don't want to see these same sharp points, and that is the major. Other than that, the watch is fantastic. So now some of the things, let's start off with, you know, the thing that will have the smallest impact. I think the chapter ring is kind of thick, so you do see that it sticks out. It is quite visible. Now it might vary by color, because I know on the red one and the olive you've got that darker gradient on the outsides of the dial, so you might not actually notice that as much. But you know, on the Gen 1 you'll see in the comparison video that it does give it a much better visual, much better aesthetic if that chapter ring is just slightly lower and more on the dial. That's one. The other major, which I think everybody will pick up on, is that pip. Now Heimdallr are known for, you know, very high pips, but this one is within that enamel on there. So a subscriber did ask a question in terms of, you know, do you think that'll probably come off? Good point. I don't know. I'm not about to knock it to try it, but I think definitely for the version 2 they should really think about subsetting this right within the enamel. I don't know exactly what technique they've done. Somebody mentioned maybe they used a little stalk and stuck the pip on top and then filled it with enamel. I don't know. I doubt it. And I think they should focus on this more than the chapter ring on the version 2. But for a first example, first batch, very good. They literally have smashed it way out of the park. So overall, very good Homage. It's so good, you know, you probably can't call it Homage, if that makes sense. And that's it for the review. Thank you everybody for watching. I'll leave the link for the store in the description below, but let me know what you guys think about this Monster Homage, and especially the guys who received this. Let me know what your thoughts on the finishing side of it. Is it the same? You know, is there some kind of variation between them? I'm hoping there is. I'm hoping they all finish to this really high standard. And of course your thoughts on the bracelet. I think this is fantastic. So again, thank you for watching, and I will see you on my next review.